you would introduce yourself and your role in the space.
Yeah, so my name is Joe Rotundi. I'm the executive director of Forge Greensboro. I started here as our first full-time employee about 2.5 years ago. We're going on 3 years. And I was a member of the space prior to that.
All right, and so how long has the space been around?
Since 2014. Started meeting in coffee shops. A group of members started meeting in coffee shops in 2013, trying to figure out what they wanted to do. Kind of the basic premise of everyone who met as a result of this Reddit post was we want to merge our tools together, work together in the same space. So there was talks about having a hacker space or having a collaborative space of some sort, and they finally landed on the Makerspace.
All right, and how many members did you start with, and how many members do you have now?
We started with 30 members who started paying before we even had a building, just to give us some seed capital to start paying rent in some place. And now we have a little over 180 members.
All right, and what does membership look like in a space like this?
What, like membership cost or so?
Tiers.
Oh,
costs,
right.
Whatever.
We try to make it as simple as possible. So general membership, all membership tiers have 24/7 access. We have a general tier where it's $54 a month. And then we have a discounted tier that we reserve for folks who are on some sort of limited income. So say they're on disability or they're retirees, they're a student, if they are a public servant, or a teacher in public schools typically don't make a lot of money. So we give them a discount for $30 a month. So it's almost a 50% discount. And then we have a family membership that is $84 a month.
Okay. And how do you deal with safety concerns with younger members and stuff like that?
That is you have to be here with your guardian if you are a minor. So the family membership is a way for us to get younger members inside the space. We don't take on guardianship here. So if you are going to join the space and use the space as a minor, you have to be here with a guardian who's also gone through the safety orientations. So as you join as a member, we have an orientation in each area. So the wood shop has its own orientation, 3D printers, laser engravers, machining, welding, and you have to go through those before you sort of are granted access to use that area. So as a minor, you'd go through that with your guardian, and you'd both be able to use the space together.
All right, and have there been any struggles or difficulties? Have you had to relocate at any given time or things like that?
So we're really fortunate in this space to have met a commercial developer who really likes what we're doing. So we've been able to pay well below market value in all the buildings we've been in. And as he's expanded, we've kind of moved into a couple different spaces on the same block. So we were around the corner in a 3,400 square foot space when we first opened, and over there for almost a little over 2 years. And while this location was being renovated for us, we kind of squatted in another one of his properties for about 4 or 5 months. It was a really awkward time for us because we couldn't set everything up yet. We lost a lot of membership at that time because you really couldn't use about half of our space. We couldn't set up our industrial equipment. We just didn't have the power or the space for it. But it was worth it because we were able to come into this space, which is it's around 8,000 square feet. So it's more than double what our previous space was. So it's worth the wait, and we've gotten back to the regular membership numbers. But that was a really tumultuous time for us. And
how is the leadership in this space organized? Is there a board or something?
Yeah. So it was very important to the founders of this nonprofit that we kept the space as affordable as possible. So they picked the nonprofit model. So we have a board of directors that manages the overall vision, but we're also a membership run nonprofit. For the first 2 years as an organization, we're completely volunteer run. So members vote when we make big decisions. So every year they vote on the board slate. We do an annual review. That's actually coming up next week. And we give members the opportunity to give their opinion in forums on important topics to them. So the structure sort of goes, so my bosses are basically the board of directors and then the entire membership. So the way that we're organized. And to organize, sort of day-to-day, month-to-month, tactics in order to get to that overall goal of the organization is my job. It's the job of our newest employee works here part-time right now. And then we have section heads who are sort of our volunteers extraordinaire, which Mikey gave the tour. Mikey's a 3D printing section head. We have those leads in each area. And they're really integral in keeping the space managed properly because they know a lot more about that specific area. Obviously, they help a lot of people out in that area, and they sort of give me a bearing on how we should develop procedures and create safety precautions, how we should create rules, and how we should manage the use of that space.
And how does your space handle the tools themselves, ownership, donations, and are any of the pieces of equipment in here not owned by the space and owned by outside people?
Yeah, so when we first started, a lot of our equipment was owned by members. Now that has shrank. One of those is grammatically correct. But the majority of the equipment we have now has been outright donated. There's a few things that we've purchased. We've started to write grants last year, and we're starting to get a lot more grants now, and we're a little bit more established. So we've been able to purchase new equipment with those grants. We have an economic development grant coming from the city of Greensboro to get a large CNC router, 4x8 CNC router, and then a 3-foot by almost 5-foot laser cutter. So it'll be like big upgrades for us. I don't think we would have found anybody who was willing to donate those things outright. So it was really, really grateful to the city of Greensboro for giving us that matching grant. But we do still have a couple of items in here that are members. So the lathes, one of the lathes, one of the mills inside the metal shop are owned by the section head in there, Joe Tiska. They were his retirement gifts from Laurelard, which is now part of ITG, International Tobacco Group. But he came with those two pieces of equipment. He had nowhere else to put them, and he was more than willing to share them. And then we have a few items in the wood shop, which one of our section heads inside there had sitting in storage, and he couldn't use them anyways. So any of the other pieces of equipment that we have that we don't own are generally, they're owned by members who had nowhere to set them up otherwise. So they're more than happy to bring them into a place that has the right power and facility for them to be able to use the equipment. And they're okay with sharing.
And in a situation like those pieces, do you have concerns or a means of dealing with if the piece is damaged or if the person leaves and you lose the piece when they leave with it?
Right. So when we get equipment like that in, we do like a yearly agreement. So we know how long that we'll have that equipment. So we'll have it at least to this year or for this fiscal year, and then we'll renew that agreement, on an annual basis. Our goal is to really replace all those with Forge owned pieces of equipment, just to avoid any sort of removal of something that we've kind of started to rely on in the process. But it's been fine so far, and we have liability waivers where everyone signs them. So it states that you won't use a machine if you don't know how to operate it, and that covers not just us but anything that happens with Forge activities, if like in the legal language of the liability and the general liability insurance. It covers us with anything that is a Forge related activity. So the owners of that equipment are also covered, so long as it's in the space being used under the agreement we have.
All right. And what aspect of the space are you most proud of?
The section heads and the orientations, the ownership that the section heads take over the orientations. I didn't really have that quite organized real well before I started. There were some section heads, but they weren't really teaching in regular schedules. But we got it going together. We got a really great group of instructors and section heads right now. They've taken a lot of ownership of the space. I would not be able to manage the space without them, so I'm really, really happy about that. I'm proud of them. They've stepped up and they do a lot around the space. So I'd have to say that's my I guess proudest aspect. And then sort of overall with makerspaces, just makerspaces period or underlined. I think the most interesting aspect is having all of these disciplines inside of the same space and the conversations that happen in the places where people gather. So we have that big table sort of in the middle of the soft space, and that's sort of a landing pad for almost every section. You know, somebody kind of dumps their project on that as they're setting up. And watching the conversations that happen there, mostly by accident, is probably the most inspiring thing about the space.
All right, and is there anything you're looking forward to, especially in the next year or so?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, we have that equipment coming from a city matching grant. We've almost raised all the money for that, and that's going to be a really exciting thing for us to have. A couple really large and capable industrial level and new pieces of equipment, because donated pieces of equipment either come to you not working or with certain characteristics that require a lot of special attention. These will be brand new, 0 miles on them, and they'll be industrial grade. So we're really excited about having that's going to really expand what people are able to do in the space, obviously.
All right, and now the last thing I think, for the most part, about the main topics here would be, how do you guys benefit the local community and your education potential for members and non-members?
Right. So it's not much different than a lot of other maker spaces. It's just that affordable access to these tools and the space and equipment. There aren't many other places around, especially outside of the realm of maker spaces, that you can go and cheaply get access to a full wood shop or welding equipment or soon CNC equipment. The only other places that I know of would be a university where you have to be enrolled in a program, you have to spend a lot of money on being in specific classes, or some high schools still have this kind of equipment, but not generally from a community access standpoint do you have this kind of offerings. And because of that, we've had a lot of small businesses start up in here. We have about 23 small businesses operating out of the space right now. We have a furniture designer and builder who just purchased his own equipment and has rented out his own shop space a couple miles from here because he's got enough connections in the space, talking with other members, and networking to where he has a full load of work, and he outgrew our wood shop. We kind of got back a whole corner of our wood shop after he graduated, because you had to store so much materials. And he was always making something. So from an economic development standpoint, it's really, really convenient springboard for an entrepreneur. You don't have to think about your own and insurance or overhead. You don't think about electricity. You don't have to sink money into capital expenses into equipment until you've got a proof of concept and hopefully a list of clients. So that's been really, really inspiring to see how that has happened just organically. We're doing things now to kind of help that along, help that process along, help people wrap their minds around, we're actually beginning a business. From an educational standpoint, we have started a program this past year. We piloted it. We're going to be sinking our teeth into it this year, called the Skills Pipeline. And our role in that is to empower and inspire people to pursue trade careers. So they'll get access to the space for a month, and they'll get a class each week with sort of a homework assignment, and during this time they'll learn how to use a specific area of the forge. They'll learn a little bit of welding, or they'll go into the machining area. We're going to expand it into 3D modeling, into using CNC equipment, expand it into trades like pipe fitting and carpentry. So people can, not really to give somebody a certification, because that's not what we want to do here. There are community colleges and trade schools that do that really well already, We want people to come in who haven't maybe seen equipment like this before in their life and see whether or not it's for them, and use it as a springboard into some sort of another chapter in their life that could be really rewarding and could lead them ideally to better than a living wage. So a lot of the folks we're getting in for that are living at or below poverty, and specifically a lot of them are in this zip code and in this district. There's a high rate of poverty, so we're trying to really help out our neighbors. And then from an educational standpoint, we are in talks with Guilford County Schools about offering this space as a place for school clubs to meet. We already have a couple of robotics clubs that meet inside the space. We want to make that relationship more formal with career and technical education instructors, or really any teacher in the school system who has an idea for for some sort of club or for some sort of class, but maybe doesn't have the budget to be able to bring out all the bells and whistles. So working together with them, we're trying to figure out a good fit for that. We've had a few talks about it, and we should be rolling something out with Guilford County Schools, if not later on this year, definitely next year.
All right, and the kind of question I tend to ask spaces as I go is, as I go forward to other spaces, what kinds of things are you interested in hearing from them or about how they handle things?
So probably the hardest or the largest challenge inside a space, especially as it grows larger, is managing and maintaining the member culture, like the feeling and that sort of electricity you get when you enter into a collaborative space like a makerspace. As they grow, we want them to grow, we want them to be more successful, we want them to have better equipment and more offerings and more space so people can do better stuff inside of them. But what tends to happen as they get larger is some of that culture becomes vulnerable, and in some spaces it may get lost completely, and it ends up becoming feeling kind of clinical, and that is it's such a shame to lose that sort of that enthusiasm that members bring to the space and that pride they have in the space to make it better. So I'd be interested in hearing and seeing how other spaces manage culture as the space grows, and as they implement procedures, how they get a sort of a consensus and buy-in from members, so that they don't lose that that sort of grassroots and gritty feel without sacrificing things like safety and procedure and ability to scale. Because there are some things that you just have to do as you get bigger, just to achieve safety and to make sure things are organized, and make sure people don't, fight over, this is my corner, this is where I leave my stuff. Well, there's got to be some rules and procedures in place, but you don't want to do too much, because then you're restricting exactly the spirit that you were trying to grow at the beginning. So that to me is my biggest concern with makerspaces, is not losing that soul, and that's what I'd like to learn the most about from other spaces. It's how they're dealing with it. If we can pull this into some sort of hey, this is what works really, really well. Let's implement this as many spaces as we can.
And one of the answers to that question, or the question to that question that came up in a previous space, is how do other spaces avoid or deal with the burnout of the founders or the board members?
Well, this organization did that by prioritizing hiring an employee when that was evidently happening, because I was hired at a time where it was very clear that there was a burnout, and we were fortunate to have a landlord who's also on our board and is a major donor to our space. Said that he would be flexible with us on our rent payments so that our employee could get paid, so I could get paid until we got again to a place of sustainability. That was a big step for us, and I was able to clean things up. And now we've been able to hire, just 5 days ago, we hired another employee to help me avoid burnout. These spaces, there's only so much you can do with volunteer effort over a long period of time, because what I've seen from makerspaces I've talked to and what I've seen in this space is the founders they start it because they want to play. Like they're making a space that they want to be. And if every time they come in, they can't play and they can't be, who they want to be inside the space, that burnout happens, and it's a huge loss. Again, it comes back to that culture question too. How do you keep that volunteerism going, but not to a place of burnout, letting people explore the space and enjoy it for what it is instead of just being a task list. So I definitely recommend finding a way to hire a staff member, even if it's part-time, to help manage the space, so that there's someone that everyone can contact, there's someone who's accountable for things, or even somebody who can help organize volunteer efforts and spread that labor load over a larger number of people instead of it just being, a core group of, say, 5 people doing everything.
Alrighty, that's all very good content.